Hello sweeties, how are you doing? Welcome to Nanyacim. If this is your first time of coming across this channel, sweetheart, kindly smash the subscribe button, turn on the notifications so you get notified each time I upload, and please give this video a thumb up. I appreciate you all, and I want to say a very big thank you to every one of you for always coming back to watch my videos. You all are the very best. So today we'll be checking out the 14-year-old boy who was the youngest person to be executed by electric chair in United States. And I am kind of curious. The first thing I asked myself was, what did a 14-year-old child did that warranted them to execute him the way they did? And the conclusion was done in 10 minutes. Anyways, you do not want to miss out on this. Let's get into it so you all will see how it happened. Let's go.
So imagine you are 14 years old and you were executed by an electric chair and then found out that 70 years later you were innocent. Well, that's exactly what happened to this little kid. He was convicted in 1944 of murdering two young girls, Betty June Binnicker, age 11, and Mary Emma Thames, age 7, in his hometown in South Carolina. This is horrible. Pause it if you guys want to read the whole story. His sister testified during the appeal that George was at home, so it was impossible for it to have been him. His sister Amy was only 8 years old when her brother got executed. This is horrible. But at least his name is now in good terms. He was innocent. How many other people do you think have been executed unlawfully? Mention any other stories so I could read about it and make a video about it. Thanks, guys. And sorry, guys, I meant to say 70 years later found innocent. In the video, it sounds like I'm saying 7. I meant to say 70.
Oh my goodness. American history, this history is so terrible and horrible. What did a 14-year-old child know? And he was constantly saying that he is innocent. You know, one thing I noticed about all these stories I have been checking out so far, it's always assault or rape. Come on. Anyways, let's get into this gist and see what people are saying about it.
This is the youngest person to ever get executed in history at only 14 years old. And his story and how he was wrongfully convicted is so sad it will make you cry. This is George Steiny Jr., and on June 16, 1944, he became the youngest person to ever be executed in the United States. Two young white girls were found murdered, and George and his sister were said to be the last people to have seen them alive. So authorities quickly showed up to George's house when his parents weren't home and arrested him. When he arrived to the police station, he was questioned in a small room alone without his parents and without an attorney. Police claimed the boy confessed to killing the two girls. Then an all-white jury took less than 10 minutes to come to their decision to put him to death, even though there was no evidence and no witnesses. And recently, 70 years after he was executed, a new investigation proved he was completely innocent. He was forced to confess to a crime he did not commit. Rest in peace, George Steiny Jr.
George Steiny Jr. He was the youngest person to be executed in the United States. In 1944, George Steiny lived in South Carolina with his parents and siblings. Ackerloo was a small working-class mill town where white and black neighborhoods were separated by railroad tracks. On March 23, 1944, the bodies of Betty June Binnicker, age 11, and Mary Emma Thomas, age 7, bodies were found in a ditch on the African-American side of town. The girls had been beaten with a piece of blunt metal, or a railroad spike. Now, at that time, George Steiny was only 14 years old, with the height of 5'1", and wore 90 pounds. George Steiny Sr. and George Steiny Jr. also helped search for the girls, but he was later on arrested for murder. While at the police station, they starved him and bribed him with food to get him to confess. After their confession, they sent him to jail. The trial only took 2 hours, but it took the jury 10 minutes to convict him of murder. During that time, his family was forced to leave town, and on execution day, they used the Bible that he always carried around to make him fit in the chair to execute him.
Can we go?
June 1944, George Stanley Jr. was the youngest person to be sentenced to death in the 28th century in the United States. He was only 14 years old. He was executed in an electric chair in South Carolina. Because he was black, he was a young black teenager. He was accused of killing two white girls, little girls, 11 years old and 7 years old. Even though he claimed his innocence all throughout the process, all throughout trial, even to his execution, he always had a little Bible in his pocket. He claimed he stood by his execution. And more than 7 years later, a judge in South Carolina, after investigating the case, found that the police had set him up because they wanted to find a guilty party. They wanted, to find a scapegoat. The cop knew he wasn't guilty. They still set him up. He was 14 years old, and he was put to death on an electric chair in 1944 in South Carolina. That 1944, that was at the same time we're like fighting the Nazis in Europe, the Germans, Hitler, around at the same time. We're like freeing Europe, bringing democracy to Europeans. We're doing this. And you still have many people alive that were alive in 1944, even if they were like kids. I think Joe Biden was alive. Maybe he was 2 years old or 3. Then you got people older than Biden alive. So it's alive in the lifespan of a human being, but it's not alive in the lifespan of a nation, a community, and the world, 14 years old. You can make yourself. He claimed his innocence to the end, and they still did it. And the cops knew. And today, you can see, like we still find more black men being exonerated from death penalty, from life in jail than all the other communities combined. They're still setting up black men, even today. You know, not saying that like black men don't commit crime, but they're still setting up black men for a lot of crimes, including, death penalty cases, which is, I don't know, scary.
This is the story of George Stinney Jr., a 14-year-old black boy living in South Carolina who was wrongfully convicted of murdering two little white girls. A complete double tragedy. It all started in 1944 when 11-year-old Betty June Binnicker and 7-year-old Mary Emma Taine bodies were found. Somehow, George ended up being accused of the murders. A jury of 12 white men took mere minutes to deliberate and accused 14-year-old George of the murders. 3 months later, George was executed. The jailers noted that the straps on the electric chair were too small for him. Despite the advocacy of so many different groups, he was still executed for the crime that he did not commit. Only in 2014 was his name cleared. His sister, being in her 80s, was present, fondly remembering her brother and the horrifying way he was taken away from her. The day would have been George's 91st birthday.
On this day, June 16, 1964, America executed the youngest person ever, which was a 14-year-old black boy named George Stinney. He was from Acaloo, South Carolina, and we call that, like, I'm from the Chuck, I'm from Charleston, and we call places like that like a hit town, which is still like a hit town. I mean, like, the racism thick. The racism thick in Charleston too, but he real thick in like them hit towns. But anyway, it took them boy 10 minutes to convict this child. 10 minutes. And it took them boys 70 years to exonerate him. Because, of course, he didn't do the crime that they accused him of. They accused him of killing two little white girls. But what happened, it actually was a white man that killed the two little white girls. And this is why, when we out here advocating for Black Lives Matter, this is why we saying we don't really care about individual racism. It's the structural and systematic racism that we care about, because that's the racism that impacts our lives.
and buried in American history, and no one really wants to acknowledge it. It's the story of a young man by the name of George Stinney. Stinney was age 14 when he was convicted of murdering 2 young white girls in his hometown in South Carolina. He was ultimately executed by electric.
Ray, I just want to ask this question. I hope you all mental health is okay, because especially you all in United States, I swear, this is, I am, God. I knew when somebody sent this to me, I personally knew this was a setup before I started watching, before I started making research, because like from beginning to the end of most of the things I have seen, I have read, it has always been a setup, and it is horrible how wicked these people can be. You know, you can imagine a 14-year-old child and the police. I mean, of all people to set up is a 14-year-old child. God, where are these people's heart? Where are their conscience? Goodness, what kind of thing is this? Say no more. I learned the parents were chased, like, you know, chased away to somewhere else. The boy did not even get to see his parents, did not get to see his siblings until his last day. And do you know the most horrible part? The most horrible part is that after 70 years, they came back to say it was all a setup. This is where I'm going to call it a day. See you all in my next video. Bye for now.